welcome to 4 NPCs trapped in an RPG you never finished. I'm the guy who spoiled the rest of the video, and I've been waiting for this day since June of 2020. Finally, they're here, my sons. I welcome you with open arms. And I also greatly appreciate your lore being a straightforward, normal story. I forgot the light again. You should already know you're just gonna have to deal with the lighting change. I'm not filming that again. Speaking of things you should be used to by now, you should know the rules to this, and if you don't, you should probably go check out my other lore videos. And why not subscribe while you're at it? It's right there, it's free, just click it. We are limiting ourselves to just the debuts as well as any official lore drops because I am simply one man and I do not have time to go through all these VTuber streams and pluck out every little crumb of lore that's dropped. So if there's anything interesting that I've missed, please let me know down below. But then again, the debuts actually have very little in terms of lore. God bless you, Holostars. Or should I say Omega Alpha bless you? Because while the debuts may not have carried a lot of story, that doesn't mean that there's no story at all. Instead, we're treated to a tale told through a manga drip fed to us on Twitter, one that starts with Omega Alpha. We open on Omega Alpha standing on a seemingly ever-expansive plain of flowers, staring down at the earth. It asks us,
"Thou seekest a new tale,"
before summoning a gigantic version of its robotic hand to use as a chair and pulling a mysterious gun out from another portal, one we'll come to know as Altair's. Holding the gun aloft, it warns us that
further pursuit of a world that is would only be in vain.
So let's take a minute and talk about this little prelude because these 2 pages actually say a lot for only containing 2 sentences. For starters, I pretty much glossed over Omega Alpha at the end of the last video because back then there wasn't really much to say or speculate on outside of God of EN. But here we have an actual reason to talk about it as it's taking an active role in this story. And yes, it seems the proper pronoun for Omega Alpha is it, as that's what's used in the description given during its official announcement. I guess that makes sense, because like, what is gender to an extra-dimensional god? I don't think you care at that point, like you're just a concept. So, based? Also in this description is the title, The Exiled of Worlds. This would likely describe why we see it in this bizarre field out in space. Omega Alpha is residing in this separate reality that allows it to look upon all the other realities. Similarly, this power would help explain something else very important to the rest of this video. Tempus takes place in a different reality from the rest of Hololive EN. In his debut, Axel casually refers to the world as Elysium. He says,
whichever part of Elysium you live in,
as if he's not aware that the rest of us don't live in his world. Now we'll come back to that later, but it is a good piece of evidence to back up the rest of this theory. Plus, let's be real, it should be pretty obvious that the Magitech RPG world is not ours, which is where Myth and Council heavily imply they take place. Thus, we can confirm that Omega Alpha's role in all of this is exactly as its description says, a watcher who decided suddenly to start taking action. Now we certainly could speculate as to whom or how Omega Alpha is talking to us, and whether or not it knows that we perceive it as a piece of fiction, so we will. If Omega Alpha can see everything in all worlds, then it makes sense that it can see our world in which it exists as simply part of a story, a piece of entertainment. And that is why it asks us if we want to hear another tale. It knows that we can perceive and interact with these other dimensions, but only through the guise of a story. Omega Alpha is allowing us to see the tale of Tempus and allowing them to interact with us through their streams. But to Tempus, they don't see us as viewers from another dimension. They don't know that we exist on Earth while they exist in Elysium. Which brings us to that redacted word. Further pursuit of a world that is what? Well, if we take it to mean like ours, we could assume that the word is something like extra-dimensional or possibly mid-dimensional. Omega Alpha seems to be implying that our world is unique in its ability to collect, view, and interact with these other dimensions, and our obsessive search to find one that can do the same is a fruitless task. But if that's the case, which is it? Are we a hub dimension? Or perhaps was Omega Alpha able to look down at our Earth because we exist with it outside of dimensions? A world it created for its own entertainment, to not be alone in its ability to watch all the other dimensions. Are we the gaze of Omega? Is where I'll stop asking these questions, because if I don't, we would be here for several hours, never even touch Tempus' story. So here's the plan. We're just going to talk about the whole story as it's presented to us, and then we'll talk about the implications of it. Sound good? Okay. We begin with Altair, guild leader of Tempus, or perhaps the entire Adventurers Guild? Those two positions are very different. He gazes out at the moon as he prepares for bed. He notices a picture of him alone, and turns back to speak to no one. The dissonance in his head causes him to collapse in pain as the world starts to glitch around him. He remembers that someone used to be there. Someone named... Next comes Magni Desmond, meeting Altair in the woods by approaching him from behind and scaring the poor boy half to death. While Desmond is acting a bit suspiciously friendly, Altair is clearly not that excited to see this stranger again. Nonetheless, Desmond decides to offer his ominous support for Altair's quest. Jumping forward a bit more, it seems Des and Altair are now regularly traveling together and are invited to visit the ringmaster of the Colosseum, Axel Sirios. A man so badass that he throws a skeleton throne. Slap that SteveSekai seal of approval on that. Best part of the lore, hands down. We end on him challenging Altair and Desmond to a fight to prove his strength and to join their team. Flash forward again and we see Altair clashing with none other than Noir Vesper. Altair is claiming that he's changed and grown from whatever kind of man Vesper thought he was before Axel crashes into the fight and breaks up the duel and says they should all go grab some food. Vesper goes full edgy tsundere and says he recognizes Altair's skill and offers his aid. The four set off into the night and have a feast while deciding what their next adventure will be. Alright, now comes the part where you start questioning my sanity and whether or not I've been inside this hole for too long. Since we've got all these stories in one place and a clear through line, let's try something different for a change. Let's not go in chronological order and instead start with the simplest aspects and then move our way into the really confusing stuff. As I already said, we don't have to do the typical work of tying all our characters together because we can plainly see that they all exist in the same world and are part of the same guild party. Additionally, as I also already said earlier, we already know the name of this world, Elysium. From what we can see of Elysium in the promo art and from the characters, it appears to be a gorgeous fantasy world that has mixed magic with technology to enhance, at least for our heroes, their weapons and armor. The style of this world also seems to be a more contemporary look mixed with medieval design philosophies. It's admittedly an aesthetic I've always loved, and to get to see it and talk about it here is certainly a treat. Like, fully out of character, this is just so up my alley and I am so grateful for it. Like, not only am I getting Holostars English, they look like this. Oh my god, I can't, I'm freaking out, dude. I'm so excited. Oh. This is the thirst bit for this episode. I'm sorry I'm not asking for DMs that we're going out into the woods. I am just so genuinely excited to see this world, and I think it looks so cool, and I just want to see more of it. Please give us more. It's all I'm asking for. I will never make a video about it again if you don't want me to, but just give it to me. I just genuinely want to see more of this world. For example, let's take Altair's armor and sword gun. And I must make a very important distinction here. This is a sword gun, not a gun blade. I don't care if its name is the gun saber, it is a gun with a sword attached, not a sword with gun capabilities. Sword guns, cool. Gun blades, lame. Both his armor and the sword attachment to his gun are made of hardened light, like a magical plasma shield. Meanwhile, Axel's ears seem to be mostly for show, but have a fun little holographic effect as well. Magni, on the other hand, get it? Uses a very different type of Magitech gear, alchemical robotics. In his reference sheet, we can see that the back two arms of his coat are basically Doc Ock-esque extra limbs, while the front four act as mechanical gloves with the spikes you see here, acting as connectors with these circles on his bracers. We actually do see him using them like this in the manga, and explains why the wristband looks so bizarre when he does. I now get to be that guy and ruin a lot of Magni art for you, because anytime you see him using all 6 of his arms, you now know that it's wrong. Because only the back 2 are robotic, and those other 4 are gloves, so he can only use 2 of those at a time. Even his opening animation, technically wrong. Sorry, you're never gonna be able to unsee that. And you're welcome. As you'd probably expect from Vesper though, he doesn't have any tech for us to discuss. From this point, however, we can jump into our first little mystery. While the manga is clearly a prequel that shows us how the party came together well before we came to know them, there is one interesting thing to note about Altair's gear as the story progresses. Altair doesn't start with the gun saber or armor of light. Instead, for the first 3 parts of the story, he has a normal sword, one he doesn't have from his encounter with Vesper on. It's not entirely clear whether he has the Armor of Light either, but considering the fact he doesn't activate it in 2 potentially life-threatening moments implies he's yet to receive that too. A significant part of why I find this so fascinating is because of a detail we've already discussed. Omega Alpha pulling Altair's gun saber out of a portal as if it is the main signifier and icon of this tale. As if when you think of the legend of Regis Altair, your mind should be going to this weapon. Like the Master Sword for The Legend of Zelda, Keyblade for Kingdom Hearts, the Buster Sword for FF7. Maybe I'm overthinking it, but I can't help but wonder why the acquisition of something seemingly so important to his character is completely skipped over in recounting Tempus's origin story. All we can really do is speculate on this and where in the timeline he must have acquired it. We can tell Desmond's, Axel's, and Vesper's introductions all fall in chronological order, as Altair is alone when Desmond offers to join him, Desmond is part of the party when Axel says he wants in, and the 2 of them are there to watch Altair prove himself to Vesper. Additionally, we know that Altair received the gun saber and Armor of Light before Vesper joined them. However, based on Vesper's words, it's heavily implied that the 2 met several times before. Could it be that Altair's retrieval of these heroic artifacts helped him grow enough to finally prove his strength to Vesper? You may have noticed that I left Altair's chapter out of that list there, and I'll be honest, there's not actually a huge reason for that. More that while it's implied that it comes first, there's actually just nothing to prove that it comes before or after any of the others. Speaking of that chapter, I suppose it's finally time we address the elephant in the room. Who was in that photo? Who is? Here comes the fun part where I get to fully admit, I don't know. But you can bet your butt we're gonna make up some stuff to pad out this video's runtime. Now, most of you may only know me as the insane person who staples together VTuber lore, but I'm also a writer. In fact, I've been writing online since well before I made videos. Hell, if you don't think most of those past lore videos were just massive stretches of me making shit up and then just covering it with impressive prose, well, I guess that just goes to show I did my job right. Thus, based on what I would do, here's a few ways I think this story might go. First off is the idea that this is potentially a future 5th member of Holostars, a potentially vital character to Tempus's past that has been ripped away, possibly by Omega Alpha, as we see the same glitch effect when Altair is attacked by his memories as we do when Omega Alpha tells us that our search is in vain. Could we see someone brought into this group as a missing member or possibly an antagonist who was once friends with Altair before something drastic happened? The second idea is a bit more complicated. Okay, a lot more complicated. You may remember from earlier that I said that Tempus doesn't seem to realize we don't reside in Elysium. This came from Axel's line in his debut where he says,
whichever part of Elysium you live in.
This innocuous statement is where I drew a lot of the basis for the idea that we exist in an extra-dimensional space, as, despite us watching and viewing from Earth, Axel, and presumably the rest of Tempus, perceive us as viewers from their world. So how does that work? Well, what if there was some kind of surrogate? What if the character that had been removed either was or was replaced by this magical stand-in? One that allows us to watch and interact with their world as if it were a stream, but for them, seems like they're just talking to a friend. Take what I'm doing, for example. I'm sitting here staring at a camera, and yet, via technology, you all are hearing everything that I'm saying, and it seems like it's in real time. It's like you're in the room with me, but you're obviously not. Now, imagine the camera I'm talking to was some kind of robot or cyborg. Same principles, cameras for eyes and technology means that you all are seeing the same thing, but to me, I think I'm talking to a person. Then you and everyone else watching has access to this robot's brain and mouth. You all comment or say is filtered into logical statements, and then the robot talks back to me so I can get your feedback. Finally, take away the fact that I know I'm talking to a robot. Take away that I know I'm looking at a camera. Imagine you all are doing this while I just think I'm explaining all this insanity to a friend. But through AI, what I say is twisted to make it sound like I know that there's thousands of you and that I'm talking to a whole group as opposed to one person. I don't know if that made any sense, but I really have no clue how else to explain it. So we're just gonna have to roll with that because I really want to get to this last theory since it is by far my favorite one. Tempus are the cast of an RPG you never finished. Hell, if it wasn't obvious that they were video game characters, they have guild cards with RPG stats and pixel art sprites of themselves. This fantastical world of quests, heroes, and such unique characters who would all make perfect sense in a party that you would build in some kind of JRPG is left abandoned by the one person meant to guide the story forward. That's why there's a glitch when Altair remembers who is missing. That's why there's no one in the photo. That's why they don't have a name. They're you, me, any number of gamers who started the plot and left these four behind to sit in an endless limbo. There's no name because there's countless names. There's no photo because they could look like any one of us. The glitch is Omega Alpha forcing the world into progressing without us. Altair, Axel, Desmond, and Vesper will all just have to meet on their own, without us to push the story forward and be the catalyst for their introductions. They'll all have to find their own way with their new free will. And their streams are like letters from their world to us, letting us know that they're doing all right. They're happy with where they are, and we don't need to worry about them anymore. They are an incredible guild now. They are Tempus. I bet you thought it was going to end there, didn't you? Well, nope. We saved the most confusing part for last. The semantics of the word guild in the context of this story. I don't get it. This isn't a bit. I'm just going to rant unscripted about this now. Okay, so a guild, right? A guild is big, a big thing, a big group of people. That's what a guild is. So an adventurer's guild is like every adventurer, at least in a city or country. You go to the Adventurers Guild, they give out the quest. It's the big organization. Merriam-Webster, that's right, we're busting it out, defines guild as an association of people with similar interests or pursuits. Doesn't help a lot. How big is an association? That's a problem. Major organization in a country or city or even the whole world. It's supposed to be like all the adventurers. And the comic says Altair is the leader of the Adventurers Guild. What? That's like, he's like the CEO of like a multinational organization and that he's supposed to grow into being a leader? I would say that's already a pretty big fucking leader, no? Okay, so he says that, so it says that, but he says, and like the other ones say, he's the leader of the Tempus Guild.
And my role here in the Guild of Tempus is I am the founder, I am the leader. Wow.
Okay. Is Tempus the Adventurers Guild? I don't think so. If it's just the four of them, that's not a guild. That's a party. And they say party. Axel says you guys wanted members for your party. And if he's the leader of the entire Adventurers Guild, I'm sure nobody is stronger than Axel, but wouldn't you think the leader of the whole Adventurers Guild would have his pick of the litter for his party? Okay. Is it like an MMO guild? Even then, it's supposed, that's like, what, 50 plus people? I don't play MMOs. I don't know. Somebody in the comments correct me. That's a lot of people. Can you really start a guild with 4 people? And if you do, again, they say Tempus Guild. Why does this say Adventurers Guild? Are they the only adventurers in the whole world? I don't get it. I'm genuinely, like, this has been bothering me for like a week. I genuinely do not understand the scope of Altair's powers here. Who is he in charge of? Like, they all have titles, like they're part of an organization. Like, they're in charge of the whole ass Adventurers Guild. Desmond's like on PR. Axel says he used to be the treasurer. He's not anymore. I think he's HR now. Great pick. This is like they own a company. And so, okay, that makes sense for an entire Adventurers Guild. But again, the scope of their story is not that big. He should not be in charge of the entire Adventurers Guild. I feel like the CEO of a company doesn't need to grow into leadership. I think he's got it. I don't get it. I think that's enough screaming about words for one video. Thank you all so much for watching. If you liked the video, please go down, like, comment, subscribe, the YouTube things. I hope you all enjoyed. I know this one was probably a bit shorter, but as I said, it's a pretty straightforward story, and with there only being 4 of them, there's not really too much that we need to tie together or speculate about. I will say I absolutely love Tempus. They are everything that I hoped and dreamed for Holostars English, and I am very excited to see more. If anyone from Tempus is watching, thank you for being so incredible and entertaining. I probably got some stuff wrong. If I did, I'm sorry. Feel free to blow me up in the comments with your corrections. And if I didn't, just ignore what I said about some made-up place called Earth. It's all just Elysium. There is no trans-dimensional viewership here. I promise. It's all Elysium. I'm in Elysium right now. I swear. And as always, I don't know how to end videos. Bye.